In fintech, the headlines are dominated by flashy consumer apps and neobanks promising disruption with every download. But beneath the surface lies a quieter, stronger force powering real economic growth across Asia, B2B FinTech. While consumer finance chases users and daily transactions, business finance tackles the hard, more important problems: working capital, supply chain flows, embedded finance, and SME banking. This is the overriding question driving today's conversation on the Asia Tech podcast. Can B2B FinTech become Asia's next major economic engine by solving the real structural challenges of business finance at scale with sustainable margins? To unpack this, we are joined by Daniel Keki, head of Revolut Business Singapore, and Raunak Dembla, a co-founder of Decentro. Gentlemen, thank you for doing this.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks, Michael.
Awesome.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to have both of you here. Okay, let's just jump right into this. How would each of you define it? Raunak, let's start with you, but how would each of you define the current B2B FinTech opportunity in Asia? And what makes this region in some ways uniquely positioned in a way that's different than the US or Europe?
So, Michael, the way I look at this is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. While a lot of our customers are running sprints, essentially, we are building core infrastructure that a lot of platforms that are building fintech in India are leveraging. So they use us to go to the market, to do things for them which they wouldn't really want to spend their time building while they focus on their core operations. I think the biggest difference between India as a market, which I broadly look at, and the rest of the world, let's say if you look at the Western markets, is the fact that India has gone through a significant upheaval in terms of regulation coming in and really dictating how things are done. So I think today India is becoming a very regulation first kind of a market where you got to apply for licenses, be granted approvals, and then you go live if you really want to do something at scale and make an impact. Whereas in the West, I believe it's a lot easier for you to figure out a new business model, to innovate on that, make some tweaks, and go to the market and then say, hey, you know what, this is working, why don't we scale this up? I think that's the way I look at it, but would love to hear Daniel's take on this as well.
Daniel, what do you think? How would you define the current B2B FinTech opportunity, and how do you think it's different here than it is in the rest of the world?
Yeah, I have to agree with Raunak on at least one part. So for me, this is really a dual problem. The first part is the infrastructure play, and that's exactly what the companies like Decentro is building. The second element is around the seamless and beautiful user experience, as well as integrating the different verticals into one platform and really giving the customers a way of interacting with their finances and businesses, as well as the retail users. We can talk about both, but probably the business side has been a lot more underserved in recent years, and it's just catching up to the retail side. But building products where you allow businesses to interact with a multitude of ways in a single platform is probably something that has not been done very well in the past. And now we are seeing multiple players trying to capture this market. How it's different compared to the Western side or the US or Europe, I think regulation is definitely one of the things. If you look at the US or you look at Europe, I think there's a lot more commonalities when it comes to regulation, more sort of economic corridors, easy to move things around. When it comes to Asia, it's very fractured. You're dealing with a bunch of smaller countries, a lot of specific regulation in a lot of specific countries, and trying to navigate this and building a product that allows users a seamless experience while being compliant is the real challenge.
Do you guys mind if we spend a couple more minutes talking about this regulation stuff? And I'll tell you why. I did an entire show for one of my other shows, a global tech podcast, where I talked about the difference in not just the regulatory environment, but the regulatory reasons between the United States and Europe, where Europe kind of sees regulations as like a social good, where they're trying to protect like the fabric of society, and where the US is just like relentless innovation. And if something breaks, well, then we'll fix it and regulate it. But the other thing that's tricky, and India is different than the rest of Asia, right? Because India is like one contiguous country. It's different in a bunch of different places, but Singapore definitely is not Malaysia. Malaysia is definitely not Indonesia. Indonesia's not Vietnam, and Vietnam's not the Philippines. How do those, and maybe we'll start with you, Daniel, but how does that sort of regulatory fragmentation impact the way you guys do business? And at some point, do you think you'll see harmonization in all those countries in a way that would make it easier to innovate, so that you can innovate in the same way in all those different places? And we'll get to India in a second.
Sure. It is one of the core questions when it comes to expansion. So Revolut's been very strong in the European markets. That's our bread and butter. That's what we know very well. And in the recent years, we've been on this expansion journey. And obviously, we launched Singapore on the retail side, I think around 2019, 2020, a couple of years ago. The business side only launched 2 years ago. And making sure that we are doing everything in a compliant manner has been one of the key questions. This is also one of the key questions in terms of how do we grow from here. I'm not going to say a big secret when Singapore has been used as an expansion hub for many of the different international companies. We are doing something similar across the next couple of years. When it comes to regulation, I think Singapore is in a, I would say, easy place, simply because of the amount of transparency and the amount of interaction that happens between the players and the regulator. I would say it's quite transparent. The regulator is approachable. The regulator is willing to work with the companies. There is regulation, and they might not always like what we are putting forward, but at least there is a dialogue, and it's not super opaque in terms of what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to do. Singapore is also very much pro-innovation, which means that the regulator has been willing to change their approach over time if they believe that, okay, now this is a much more clarified space, and therefore we are happy to put some regulation around it instead of just saying we are not playing here. In a sense, I think Singapore regulatory environment is something that the surrounding countries are looking towards, and I think that the regulatory environment is getting clearer as we move forward. You mentioned Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia. I think it's getting better and better, but I definitely think that Singapore is the one leading the way in clarity.
Got it. So, Raunak, do you want to comment on this as well? It's different. Look, I've always found that, again, I used to work at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. We did a ton of business in Singapore. And I always found the Monetary Authority of Singapore to be really progressive and forward-looking. And from a regulatory standpoint, one of the strongest and one of the best regulators in the world. But to be fair, I've always thought as well that, particularly since I did an entire show on India, that the Indian sort of financial services regulators have been really forward-looking too. I mean, UPI is a perfect example of this. But maybe you can talk about the things that concern them, right? And where they're not regulating the most, but the things that concern them. Is it like what's taking place in second, third, and fourth tier cities as opposed to what's taking place in the big parts? Like, what are they really concerned about?
Look, if I were to put myself in the shoes of the regulator, right, the only thing that I think they're looking to make sure does not go wrong is essentially the consumer does not get taken for a ride. Now, this could mean that interest rates for a lending product should be democratic, it should be accessible, it shouldn't be outrageous. It could also mean that the banking or the financial system shouldn't really take the load for, let's say, unchecked credit growth. So in a sense, all they're looking to make sure is that the system doesn't break, and they're putting the consumer at the center of the system. So platforms like Decentro, platforms like, let's say, Revolut that's operating in India, you have a lot of other fintechs who are doing a lot of lending activity. We all are, I would say, we all come second. Investors are really looking at what business models can they pump money into so that they can have the next leg of growth. But then the RBI, which is the Reserve Bank of India, is very clear that they will allow models that have basically regulatory oversight on lending practices. Who are they lending to? How much are they lending? Are you over leveraging the society and stuff like that? So I think there is a lot of, I would say, advice that you could take from the Reserve Bank of India before you innovate. I think that'll keep you in good stead.
Got it. Where do we think that the markets, at least in the B2B space, is most mature today? And more importantly, Raunak, because you just brought this up, where the growth is, where do you think the steepest growth curves are for the next, 6 to 7 years? And we can start with you.
Sure. So again, looking at India as a market, right? We've been through a couple of waves in fintech. Specifically, if you look at it, the first wave was payments. You had all of these giant payment companies take birth over the previous decade. So you've got very notable names like Razorpay, Cashfree, PayU, all of these giant businesses that were born in the tens. I think to a large extent, the next wave has been lending, and anyone and everyone is trying to get into lending, or it is the end game of sorts. While now lending has become so heavily regulated and scrutinized, I think the next leg of growth is coming in from wealth products. So India is a huge market. You essentially want to enable people to invest the money that they earn. Earnings are increasing. India is a savings-oriented culture or economy, right? So I would say an average Indian doing well enough would put aside 20-30% of their monthly savings as soon as monthly earnings as soon as it comes in.
Nice.
Right. So you need to give them products that help them save. So this could be savings in the form of digital gold, because again, culturally, gold is very prominent in India.
Yeah.
People want stable returns. They don't really want to go for the 12-15% kind of range. They want to park their money in FDs. So FD as an industry or category has been doing really well. The equity markets have been doing well. So mutual funds have got a lot of attention. And also, lastly, I think a lot of the big brokers, if you look at the likes of Zerodha, Grow, Angel One, Motilal Oswal, they all made money off F&O participation by the retail investor. Again, the regulator looking at that, which is the SEBI, or Securities and Exchange Board of India, is kind of coming down on F&O. But if you largely look at it, I think the next 4 to 5 years looks super exciting if you're building anything in the wealth space.
Got it. And Daniel, how about you?
Yeah, I have to echo, especially on the wealth and trading side. I think it's one of the fastest emerging space. We see a huge boom, even within Revolut. The wealth and trading department has been one of the fastest growing segment for us. I have to sort of go back to my initial statement of building platforms where you allow your users to do separate things. I think wealth and trading is definitely one of the key elements or the key verticals that is going to enable the next leg of growth. So from a product point of view, I do agree that credit is always going to be high margin. As long as you can figure out the risk management part and do it sustainably, it is sort of the golden goose of financial institutions.
Yeah.
However, it's very difficult to do it right, and it's even harder to do it at scale. Wealth and trading, I think it's somewhat easier to do it right, both from a regulatory and a risk management point of view, especially if you have a society who's not chasing the pump and dump. I want to do 100% in 2 days. I'm very happy with a steady 5 to 10% yield on my investment over the I don't know how many years, and just give opportunities and a diverse portfolio to clients to enable them to save in a varied way. Now, if we talk about from a geographical point of view, I think that's the other side. As you mentioned, Michael, Southeast Asia is an incredible market. You have Singapore, which is a tiny island, which is a very, very mature market.
And also very wealthy, right? Because this is the other thing I wanted to bring up. Well, both of you talked about wealth products. If you don't mind me interjecting here a little bit, I know, and Raunak, you can correct me here where I'm wrong, because I'm making a presumption. But if I look at India, the GDP per capita, right, of the overall country, it's going to be very different than if I just look in Mumbai or Bangalore, stuff like that. So it's going to be completely different. But I guess, and Daniel, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think both of you can kind of answer this question, right? Because I kind of look at Singapore like the Boston of Asia, right? It probably has the same sort of job profile, a lot of financial services and stuff like that. But also the GDP per capita, the income is about the same, if not even higher, right? Is there a trigger point when you look at some of the other countries or some of the smaller cities in India where GDP per capita hits a certain point and then people start to save and they're more interested in wealth products and frankly, even insurance products? Maybe Daniel, you can comment on that and then we can go to Raunak.
Sure. So you used the analogy of Singapore is the Boston. Singapore is the Boston without rural America. So there is no rural America in Singapore. It is just Boston, which makes the country
there are no suburbs,
super
right?
compact. Correct. So this is why Singapore is sort of a unique island in the Sea of Southeast Asia. If you look around, and I think maybe we can use the Philippines as a very good example here. Philippines has been an incredible growth journey. If you look at how the middle class is increasing in the Philippines, how they are sort of coming up in the global workforce as well, they are highly skilled, they are very, very respected, and it's a huge population, very sort of fragmented from a geographical point of view, but huge population. If some of these global fintech providers can figure out how to do the Philippines or Indonesia, for the same matter, in a sustainable manner, it is an incredible untapped growth potential. You've been dealing with a lot of local players providing decent services, but very fragmented. If one of these platform plays can figure out how to do it, go to market and provide a good service to these customers, I think that's exactly where the next leg of growth is coming from. Singapore is a super mature market, and yes, you can make a lot of money here as well, but it's not going to be the exponential boom. It is going to come from these regional players.
Yeah.
And can I just make one other point? Sorry, about Asia, and then we'll jump into about Southeast Asia, and then we'll jump into India as well. Just looking it up, right? So the Philippines, you're right, has 117. Let's call it 120 million people rounded, right? But the other thing is, it's also the 5th largest English-speaking country in the world. So expanding there actually ends up, to me, seeming like a little bit easier. Culturally, it's different for sure, but language-wise, it makes it easier. Vietnam as well, 102 million people, but a slightly different dynamic. Anyway, so Raunak, why don't you comment on this?
I actually count myself very lucky because I have an eagle's eye view of what's happening across industries, right? Because we serve customers, or a lot of my customers are market leaders in these categories. And one of the things that we one of the solutions that we've recently launched is an API that is being used right at the start of their customer onboarding journeys. So probably one of the first APIs that get triggered in the journey. So it's a proxy of sorts to figure out what is the kind of action that they're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And the numbers that I see are mind-blowing.
Tell me.
Without really taking names, if we are working with probably 8 out of the top 10 brokers, stockbrokers in the country, and some of the top 2 or 3 players are onboarding upwards of 50 to 60,000, or at least these are downloads, right? 50 to 60,000 users on a daily basis.
Oh my God.
That's steady state, right? So that's every day. It's unbelievable, right? And this growth is clearly not coming from tier 1 cities, right? Let's take it there. I would count in about 10 cities in India. Their growth is being unlocked from literally the heartland of India. They're going way deeper than tier 2, 3. And this essentially is only possible because of, according to me, social media. There are a lot of influencers, right? And everyone's on Instagram. We don't have TikTok in India, so Instagram and Facebook is what everyone's on, and people are looking up strategies. People are being told about, hey, you should buy the stock, and the investment values are so low. So your participation is as low as probably 100 rupees, right? That's like $1. So it's so easy to get in, and people are people want to take part in this action. They don't want to be left behind. So I don't really think there's anything correlated with income. People are investing across the board, across the spectrum. And there's this very amazing picture that I saw the other day of, we have auto rickshaws in India, commonly known as tuk-tuks, right? So this set of people, they have a lot of time on their hands. So a lot of them, you would see, while they're, let's say, stuck in traffic, they'll be scrolling Instagram. But then you also have this other set of people who are now trading while they're stuck in traffic.
No.
So that is, I'm not making this up, right? That is essentially what's happening. So people are hooked. That's all. That's literally, I think, the summary of this industry.
I feel like I could spend hours talking to both of you about autonomous driving because it gets into this. And I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that I've posited for a long time is that once automobiles, moving vehicles, once mobility vehicles, right, become autonomous, then the windows that are there, whether it's a tuk-tuk or not, right, are going to have screens on them that people are going to use to trade. And you've just kind of validated this idea that, okay, it's not there yet, but people, when they're stuck in traffic, are doing that already. Yeah.
Yes.
But I do think it's kind of, you don't think there's a GDP per capita trigger. You just think that because it's so easy to get in and get out,
Yeah,
that even for $1 or 100 rupees, people are just going to trade regardless of what their wealth standard is. That's super interesting, actually, because that's not what I would have thought.
Maybe just to build on this, sorry, just 1 second here. It's also a lot about trends. So what Raunak said about social media, there are very big global trends driving these waves. If you look at just the amount of personal finance and business finance YouTube channels, for example, that popped up in the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years, the amount of content created around how do you manage wealth, how do you create wealth, how do you keep and make sure that the money is not getting inflated away, is something that has never happened in the 2000s or early 2010s. The content was not there. The influences were not there. Masses, and when we talk about India, we can talk about masses. Masses have no idea about this thing. It's not in the curriculum at school. It's not being taught in traditional school system. It is something that most people and even businesses, for the same sake, get exposed to this for the last probably 5 to 10 years, a lot more compared to before. And as, for example, if we stick to the tuk-tuk driver example, these people have been, mobile phone penetration in India has been around close to 100% for a long time now. But what have been they doing in the last maybe 5 years before? Mobile games. Mobile games is now saturated. I'm not saying they are not playing anymore, but now it's not the only thing that they are doing in their spare time. So there is this cultural shift that, okay, maybe investing is something that I should be thinking about rather than just leave it to the bankers.
Also, just to add one additional point, right? And I think this is the most, I would say, interesting change that's happening. ChatGPT is on everyone's mobiles today, right? All of them have ChatGPT, and you can chat with it in your local language. Hey, which stock should I buy today, right? What's happening? Which stock grew by 5%, 10%? It'll give you, whether it's right or wrong is a different, question altogether. But the information fundamentally is available at their fingertips in seconds, and they're equipped to trade. So that's essentially what it is.
So is there I mean, we didn't even plan on talking about this at all, but because you brought up ChatGPT, because you brought up social media, like I've done so much work on this recently that it's kind of stuck in my head. And one of the things that Daniel said earlier, or maybe both of you said it, was that like you want to give, and we can do this in the SME context, or we can do it in the individual user context as well. But you said you want to give individual users like a beautiful experience. I think that's what I wrote down, a beautiful user experience. So one of the things that I noticed was that OpenClaw, have you guys heard of OpenClaw? This thing that Peter Steinbergen built and that OpenAI recently partnered with him, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that he was talking about, and it's not a perfect product. I'm not presuming it's a perfect product, but I'm just saying as a POC, as a proof of concept, right? One of the things that I was thinking about was, is Agentic AI going to become the new user interface on top of the stuff that is already out there, right? Because you said they're equipped to trade. And I think this can be true for any of the services that companies like you guys offer and any of the products that you have, that at some point the API becomes more important than the UI. Have you guys given any thought to that idea, in the sense that maybe people will start interacting with your business services through an API, even if they're an SME, right? Even if they don't have the technical chops to be able to do it, because somebody inside the company is going to figure out a way to say some software like OpenClaw, right, that does some kind of agentic AI. It's in a simple way at first, right? They're not going to take massive risk with this. But have you considered the fact that that's going to become the new user interface, if that makes sense?
I have a couple of things that I'm happy to share on this one. So there are quite a few angles to this. I think there is a very clear SME payments angle, and how does that environment and infrastructure integrates with all these LLMs and the new wave of social shopping, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a very clear need for a more API-driven and integration-driven payment infrastructure, where it doesn't really matter who the end buyer is, but the merchant who's selling the product will need to be equipped in a way to be able to provide the checkout and payment experience to these users, make sure that the payment is seamless. So recently, Revolut has partnered with Google's payment agent protocol. It is brand new news. I think it came out a couple of weeks ago. We are one of the first sort of merchant acquiring providers, which is part of our B2B sort of product offering, where we are building together with these LLM. And once again, this one is specifically Google, but obviously all of the big players are usually working with most of the big ones. we have to get to a place where agents are equipped, these basically AI agents are equipped to do the checkout, the end-to-end experience of looking at something, buying something, checking out something, completely autonomous. Now that only works if the merchant layer and the payment layer behind this entire ecosystem works in a way that the end user, I literally only have to say that, hey, Mr. OpenAI, or hey, Mr. whichever agent I'm using.
Anthropic or whatever, it doesn't matter.
Anthropic, it doesn't really matter. I like those shoes, buy it. Now, today, that still usually requires the agent sourcing you the options.
Yeah.
This is where it's going to be the cheapest. This is what ships to your country. This is your options, etc., etc. At the end of the day, you will have to click on it. You will have to go to the website. You will have to check out, etc., etc.
Right.
The moment you integrate the checkout experience, and this is what we are doing at Revolut, for example, we have RevPay, which is our proprietary sort of Revolut to Revolut payment scheme, and this is integrated with our merchants. Once we integrate this into all the LLM systems, an end user will be able to just buy something from one of our merchants using Revolut Business without any interaction, because the agent will be authorized to make the payment, use Revolut Pay, check out, and make the order without the need for the user to actually click through the journey.
Sorry, Raunak, did you want to comment on this?
Look, I can share one example of what's happening in India. So Zerodha, which is one of the biggest stockbrokers in the country, has just opened up a set of APIs that allows you to look at, get a live feed of prices, that allows you to look at your portfolio, things like that. So now all of this can be hooked up to AI of your choice to analyze your portfolio, to give you stock tips, to kind of take decisions on your behalf and execute those decisions. So I think this is happening. It's just about started, I would say, in India. And again, I think there are two parts of India, right? Like I said, platforms are having 50, 60,000 downloads a day. Now that's not coming from the users who would be savvy enough to do this, and probably 1% of India would be savvy enough to do this as of today, but it's here. It's already here.
So can we go back and talk about the SMEs and the SMBs as well in both places, right? What are some of the biggest pain points that they're facing, and where are the places where you think it's most ripe for solving these problems, if that makes sense? I don't want to use the word disruption per se, but like, where do you think is the best place for the problems that they're having? And probably you're going to say cross-border, because this is the thing that everybody tells me, but I'm curious to hear your takes on this. And Raunak, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So if you look at, there would be two categories of SMEs. One is SMEs who export services or products. Biggest problem for them is the cost of bringing money into India is quite prohibitive, upwards of 7-8%, which essentially creates problems for them. You're not really able to be competitive in the market. So I think there are a lot of players who have come into the space, very notable senior executives from the cross-border industry or from the payments industries have started companies like Skydo, Xflow, and they're solving for the SME exporter as such. I think the other problem that largely exists today is credit availability for them. The larger SMEs are typically kind of, I would say, served decently well by the banks, but the smaller ones are definitely not. Today, there's ample amount of data available. So you've got enough payment data available. You've got the infrastructure to analyze alternative data. So I think that is definitely improving day by day. Fintechs are leading charge there in terms of enabling credit for them. Apart from this, I think largely speaking, for them, the next problem is going to be how do you really source business from other parts of the world, or how do you deal with the right set of people? So data to enable right decisions is not available. And there's not really a fintech problem per se, but when you step out of your market, who are the folks who you want to deal with? Because essentially, a lot of these business models rely heavily on credit, right? Your sale happens on credit terms. So you want to be selling, but you want to be selling to the right folks. So that's another problem statement that I think SMEs in India are grappling with for sure.
Can I ask you why it's so expensive to bring money into India? Like, I understand like that expatriating capital is probably not something that governments at scale want to have happen, but why is bringing money into India expensive?
So from what I've understood, essentially there's all of these money transfers are happening on the Swift network, right?
Yep.
So the banks essentially are placing large margins on top of what they paid to get the money into India. So your forex conversion markups, the service charge that you levy on that particular transaction, all of it adds up to as much as the transaction costs, pretty much.
God.
And also, unfortunately, the bank, I mean, whatever it is, right? The banking system is built in such a way that it's built for the big guys. So if you're a large conglomerate exporting, you're going to have probably the management of banks visiting you every day to get business from you, and you're getting the most competitive rates. But if you're an SME who's exporting, I don't know, probably $250,000, nobody really wants to put in effort to acquire you, right? So you walk into the bank, you run behind the bank. It's literally the other way around. So I think that's where the system is broken.
So doesn't that leave a room? Because we see this in South America a lot, right? The same thing where the SMEs there don't get served at all by the big banks, and that's why you have places like, God, the name of the bank is escaping me. But say again.
Are you speaking about Belvo?
Yeah, but I mean there are a bunch of them, right? And
right.
does that mean that there's a market opportunity in India to build this business as well? Because the reason why the small companies don't get served is because it's expensive for the big banks.
Yes,
They're not structured in a way for them to serve them. So that every transaction, like you said, for $250,000 cost them the same amount of money that it would cost them to do for $250 million. They'd rather do that instead.
Yeah.
Is there a market gap that needs to get filled there?
It is getting filled. There are couple of companies that I mentioned previously, someone like a Skydo, they've hired a bunch of folks, and they're sales driven, right? So they're going into the market, they're speaking to these folks, they're onboarding them, and that's something that a bank wouldn't be able to do because they don't really have those many people available at their disposal at each branch to serve. But it is being handled at the moment. So I think over the next 2-3 years, they're going to scale up even further. RBI has come out with specific licenses to allow this. So there's going to be more players coming in, applying for licenses, getting approvals, and will be serving this market as well.
Got it. So Nubank was the bank that I was thinking about in South America.
Right.
We've actually done a bunch of episodes with them, so just for some reason the name just did not pop into my head. Daniel, why don't you jump in here as well? Talk to me about what are the biggest pain points that you see that SMEs still face, and where do you think there are places to solve these problems or room for innovation?
Sure. I think first I'm going to react to what Raunak has been saying, and then I'll go into a bit different topic. The first one is around who are the players trying to solve this issue? And it's not just India, it's across all these Southeast Asian markets as well. I can just use very basic examples, the currency clouds, the tunes, even Visa and MasterCard, the biggest card schemes have been very active in this space. They both have Visa Direct, and MasterCard has a scheme as well. They are building these rails. Many times tokenization comes into the play, but that's another podcast, I think, if you want to talk about.
I was going to say we should talk about tokenization and stablecoins all day as well. We can mention it if you want to, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I'm not going to go into deep there. All I'm saying is that comes into play, and increasingly it's come into play. However, the regulatory angle will be very real. So depending on the country and depending on the corridor, stablecoins and using stablecoins and payouts are a whole different pile of mess. And doing right will yield huge results, but I think we are at the stage where people are just figuring out how to do it. The other side of this entire experience is, once again, go back to product. So if the question is where the growth is coming from, as you mentioned, there is still a lot of underbanked territories, especially in the smaller space. Large old companies are very used to going to the high street bench. They don't mind the hassle. They have their banker. They are very much used to operate in this very sort of opaque and old school style. But these are all the large established companies. Across the last 20 years, we've had a huge wave of much more agile, smaller SMEs. The digital space basically erupted in the last couple of years, which means that you have all of these new players who will never go to a bank branch and take a sticker and then wait in line for 37 minutes and then tell a clerk how their dog died yesterday. I'm sorry, but it's just the reality. That's not happening anymore. So we need to build digital products. And I love to go back to the beautiful product sort of sentence, because that's one of the core things Revolut is really passionate about, is that not just build functionality, we build things people want to come back again and again and use it. So functionality paired with usability and just the enjoyment of using the platform is something super important how we build products. This starts with the onboarding journey, and we can go back to the autonomous driving example. We do have examples now that people, because it's such an easy onboarding journey, as long as you have the right documentation in place, I always have to caveat it. On the retail side, it's much more simple. If you talk about the Singapore experience, you can leverage sort of the My Infos and the Sing Passes, and it's super, super simple. When it comes to the business side, it's a bit more complex. However, once again, Singapore is super ahead of probably the rest of the region. We have incredible databases, government-run databases that you can trust, and therefore it just takes the problem out of the entire onboarding journey and the risk. In other countries, it's a much bigger challenge. So whoever can figure out how to do the onboarding journey and then provide a set of products that now we can talk about the finance teams and the accounting teams enjoy using, and they don't see doing months in reconciliation, and they don't see payments and bulk payments and salary payments a hassle and something that they have to hate on a daily basis.
Right.
It gives them the joy of interacting with the platform, and as long as the product behind also works, it just becomes this catalyst of growth. And once again, we can talk about the regions, but it doesn't really have to talk about like this only works in Indonesia or this only works in Philippines. If you can build this mix in Singapore, you can take market share in Singapore as well.
Yeah, sorry, Raunak, did you want to add anything there?
No, I'm completely in agreement with what he said. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I was nodding along. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, look, one of the things that I've seen just structurally over time, and I think this is where Revolut Business comes in, but again, not to talk so much about the product per se, but this idea that like even small businesses are starting to say, because you said they want to interact with finance in a way that makes them happy, not like it's drudgery, right? And if you can build those services at scale so that everybody can use them in a way they don't then have to build that stuff internally, if that makes sense. And then you're right, that whole experience becomes way better. It almost like disintermediates the need for them to do that stuff internally. And then all of their sort of finance stuff ends up being a much better product for them externally. But here's what I'm really curious about. Where does, because we touched on it a little bit, like we could talk about stablecoins, we could talk about other types of emerging technologies, but we did mention AI a little bit. And I don't think we can finish this conversation without talking a little bit about where like artificial intelligence and automation fits into these procedures and processes that we've been talking about. And I'm curious what your view is on where this stuff fits in, particularly in the B2B workflow stuff.
Everyone's really trying to figure out what's the low-hanging fruit. How can we kind of get, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Singapore FinTech Fest was like last year, but Global FinTech Festival in Mumbai was every second stall was AI this, AI that, AI underwriting, AI voice bots, and all of that, right? So I think voice has found a really good use case in BFSI. So one of the lines of business that we operate, which is already using or leveraging AI, is debt collections. So we have a lot of activity that's typically just manual calling, right? You're calling the borrower, hey, why don't you repay us on the 15th, right? What happened? You want to understand the disposition. You want to know what do you do, what's the plan of action. All of that can automatically be done leveraging AI voice bots now. So the bot is fed the information, it starts calling, it's calling 30, 40, 50 people at once, speaking to them, recording what they say, and giving you the data. So that's done. Now, super interesting use case that a couple of platforms that I know are working on, one in the e-com space, essentially is this platform is also going into the hinterlands of India. So their focus is on tier 3, 4, 5 and beyond. And people have never used buy now, pay later. So, it's funny where you go in, you want to buy something, you place an order using the buy now, pay later option. And then they used to cancel the order in about 15-20 minutes. And this was very, perplexing. So these folks called up these users, said, hey, why did you do this? And they said, oh, we placed the order. It was easy for us to figure that out. What I did not figure out was, how do I repay you? So I didn't want to proceed with the order without having that understanding. So people are trying to figure this out. So now, if there is a bot that could kind of be on the screen of that checkout, on the checkout screen, and you can just talk to it, right? And you could just, either trigger a call, or just it speaks to you and says, okay, so this is what's going to happen. Here's how you're going to repay us. This is what the process is going to look like. Or it could also explain complex KYC and onboarding screens. I think these are, I would say, applications of AI into what we do already as of today. Going down, let's say even 2 years from now, I think all of this is going to be mainstream. Your first instinct would be to talk to the bot and figure things out. And who knows what else is going to happen going forward. But I think it's a huge productivity unlock for us, right? So with our debt collections business, human callers are no longer trying to connect, calling somebody, waiting for them to pick up. That those days are done. Now you're just calling those high ticket size borrowers who haven't repaid, or the most sensitive ones, and trying to figure out how can you crack a deal with them, do a settlement or whatever, right? So that's what they're working on.
It's so interesting. I did an entire episode this morning on this company called Tavis.io that announced this like natural looking human model, where they say that like every pixel in your face, it actually does they can do 10 or more, what is it, like feelings, and they can do it in real time. So like they can react in real time to people. That as a human interface to exactly what you're talking about. If it's a video call, where it's getting to the point where it's almost indistinguishable. I want to I want to follow up with Daniel on something, and Raunak, you can feel free to comment on this as well. Do you really think, because here's the thing, I know that I can get every piece of neurosurgery, and I say neurosurgery because my brother's a neurosurgeon, or he's retired now, but he was a neurosurgeon, right? But I know that I can get every piece of neurosurgery information. I can probably take an MRI of my head, feed it into the internet, and get feedback from it that tells me exactly what's wrong with me, if anything, and then get some kind of diagnosis because every piece of information is already out there. But is that what we really want? And I think because of that, like, I just want to talk to a doctor. I want to talk to a real doctor. I don't know if that's just me, but I do think that humans want to have this like visceral relationship with other humans. But that's just an example. But then what I want to know is, do you really think that people or businesses at scale are going to be using artificial intelligence tools to build their own software, as opposed to just saying, my core competency is creating like ceramic bowls, and I'm going to rely on whether it's Revolut or Dissenter or whomever to do all the back end stuff, and I can connect to it using AI whenever I want to, but I'd rather have some expert updating this all the time, because that's what I think is going to happen. But again, it could be an age thing with me, with like, that's just how I perceive the world to be. But again, I've seen tons of these tech cycles, tons of them, and at the end of the day, I think things don't change nearly as much as we want them to or expect them to in some cases. And I strongly believe like platforms like yours will sit below agentic AI, and it'll go to you for the answers and then come back to themselves. They may not even know where it's going, right? But that's what I think is going to happen. I don't think people are going to build their own stuff, because I just don't think it's their core competency, and they're not going to be able to know if it's right or wrong. And at the end of the day, they're just going to disintermediate themselves out of that and use platforms that are already doing it, because you're just going to keep iterating on product. They're not going to do that. What do you guys think about that? And then maybe I'll let you guys go, because we've been at this for a long time. Sorry, go ahead. I'm curious what you think, Daniel. Then Raunak, we'll go to you. Then maybe we'll close.
It's a very good question. Once again,
you know what I mean, right?
Yes. So maybe I'll start with the first part around, do we really need AI to replace everything? I agree with you. I don't think we need. I don't think we need to do that. And I think there is a huge, once again, cultural wave around nostalgia and handiwork and all that's trade. It's having a renaissance across the globe. It's not just a Singaporean thing, or it's a US thing. It is coming back. Nostalgia has been huge around. There's a lot of industries that you can mention here. Maybe I can mention Pokemon as a very recent example. It's enjoyed. It has the biggest boom since I don't even know when. It went into this early stage, and then maybe for 20 years it was very quiet, and then for the last couple of years it has a huge comeback. It's physical, it's cards, it's something you touch, it's something you buy, you sell. It has nothing to do with AI. Nope. So I do think from a business point of view, there are a lot of businesses who are going into this space, and then AI is just an infrastructure layer behind it. So I don't think, and I hope that we are not going to go into this futuristic future where nothing exists anymore and we don't interact with anything. Because
I just don't think humans want that, but yeah, go ahead, sorry.
So I really hope we are not going there. And I also hope that we will keep using platforms such as Revolut, which will provide the experience. And we are the ones that need to make sure that on the back end, everything is efficient.
Yeah.
AI will bring efficiency never seen before. Just on building on what Raunak said around that collection, we've partnered with 11 labs not a long time ago.
Yep.
Our support agents, handling support queries, completely transformed. And now we are at the stage where you can literally call an AI agent and you will never know that this is an AI agent. It will talk perfectly in your native language and it will handle your queries as if a real agent. It's going to be more polite. It's not going to get angry. It's going to be very efficient in terms of figuring out your answer, and it's not going to get tired.
And their kids don't have to go to school. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, correct. And you can multiply it infinite amounts of times. So there is a lot of AI use cases that we are building into. Once again, we can go back to the wealth management as well. How do you optimize portfolios on the go? You can go to the support piece. You can go to the payment piece with the agents checking out, and how do you enable them? So there's a lot of artificial intelligence built in behind the platform.
Yeah,
but
sure.
my firm belief is that platforms are not going to go away. And if you give customers and B2B businesses a way to interact with all of these in a concise way that they understand how to use, it's going to make their life much easier.
Agreed. And I don't think they're ever going to want to stop doing that. Raunak, what do you think? And then we'll close.
Right. I think it's all about efficiency and productivity. So the way at least we look at it in Decentro is how can we do things faster? How can we do things better? And how can we do things with probably lesser number of people? So for example, if that means building a dashboard, which would have taken us, let's say, a month or two in a matter of 2 days, which will help my customers to interact with my APIs better, that's what we do. If it means that exactly like what Daniel mentioned on, instead of having a couple of thousands of callers, you could just make do with 100 folks and you've got AI doing things for you. That's what essentially we want to be doing. I think while in India, we are looking at AI, I think there's also a little bit of hesitance, especially from the regulator in terms of where is this data going? Where is it being processed? So I think BFSI in India is definitely going to adopt to AI very fast, either if it's, let's say, something that, let's say, the Reserve Bank of India comes out with, or if the government kind of puts their stamp of seal of approval, or so to say, on any one of these Indian models, or if, let's say, OpenAI can come in and say, hey, we are going to have data centers in India now. Yeah, everything's here, do what you want. But yeah, I think in terms of use cases, it's super exciting. There's a lot of exploration going on, but it's mainly at the POC stage.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I knew when we invited both of you on this was going to be great. And I want to thank both of you, Daniel Keki and Raunak Dembla, for coming on and doing this today. You guys were both awesome. You should both come back. Actually, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much again.
Thanks a lot, Michael. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. I think I had a blast. I think fantastic way to end the week for me. So thank you for having me.
Awesome.